As textile revivalist and guardian of handlooms, Sabita works with the impoverished weaver communities, helping them with designs, innovations, and marketing. And when they become computer savvy and are able to sell their products online, she moves to another community. During the pandemic, she helped about 100 weavers belonging to clusters in different pockets sell the products, raising about 8.5 lakhs on her individual effort. With donations that came spontaneously, she contributed to sustainable livelihood to these weavers from 4 clusters. Turning to education and working with the trust, Sabita has donated mobile phones for online studies for students and making scholarships possible for youngsters below the poverty line. She places impoverished people who have lost their jobs, mainly domestics, and connects them to elders registered with Udavi. Founded Udavi 8 years ago, where voluntary workers give their time to bring light into the lives of senior citizens. For International Women's Day 2017, Sabita was awarded the Probus Award for Excellence in Service for the Community and the Spark Award for Excellence in Journalism in 2018, and the Rotary Award for Social Welfare in 2021. So that's about Sabita. A brief introduction. She has various, we can go on and on. In fact, she was the first one to come up with these, mix and match blouses, which are topping the fashion charts even today. So that's about, there is many things about her, which is very interesting. So moving on to the book, I'm just going to start with a brief introduction of the book. What I felt is this. So the Looms of Arivur is a moving story of the lives of handloom weavers in India, their ideals, their skills, the story of their impoverished lives, their dreams, and their conflicts. It also showcases the acceptance of their destiny, their weakness, their inability to change and adapt to newer marketing ways, and their inability to appeal to the changing sensibilities. It also openly shows the economic between the educated and the skilled. So the educated are always more privileged, even though they can be very and are very highly skilled. It really brings to the readers that disparity, the economic disparity. I think that was the most moving thing to me. As I read the book, that is uh, that is a fact that really hit me very hard. So, so that's a little introduction about the looms of Arivur. At this point, TG, I could request you to play that first clip of Mrs. Sabita, where she's talking about.
Kanchipuram is known as a city of thousand temples, famous for its legendary silk saris and its temples. And religion and weaving have always been melded together. Kanchipuram has been known as a city of thousand temples. There are temples everywhere, and it's also known for its legendary silk saris. See, one would imagine that Kanchipuram silks has always been there from time immemorial. Actually, it was cotton weaving which was predominant in Kanchipuram. Silk only came about, say, 400 years ago. It's all so difficult because in the old days, it was just oral tradition, passed on from father to son. Nothing was documented. So research was done through talking to old weavers, talking to people in the trade, and so on. One very interesting fact is that the weavers consider themselves descendants of sage Markandeya. Sage Markandeya, when he was very young, from an early age, worshipped Lord Shiva.
Yeah, that's just, these videos are available on YouTube also, right, Sabita ma'am? It's there on YouTube. So whoever is very passionate about handlooms or want to understand better, I'm sure you can just search for them and enjoy them. So, okay, so let's move on to the book the book in detail. So my first question, Sabita ma'am, is what made you write the book, The Looms of Arivur?
Okay. That's a question I've been often asked, Kalpana. And before I go further, let me thank the book club. I'm a member, of course, and also for Kalpana Umri for inviting me to join. And it has been a pleasure seeing the spate of messages that come on WhatsApp. And, I just watch and I take it in. I'm sorry I've not been so active because I know in the WhatsApp group, you get into a conversation and then it does take up a lot of time. But believe you me, I enjoy it. I see all the repartees and I see all the, nice things said, and then so many books to be read. And I think you are doing a great service to the reading public by having this, because reading has taken back seat, with all the other things that we've got, television and the programs that we have. One's tends to sit in front of the TV and then you binge watch. I mean, I don't, but a lot of people do. So I'm sorry that this has gone, to the reading is now not so much as it was. So people like you are going to revive this. And yes, coming back to your question, and thank you very much for the very long introduction that you gave, Kalpana. You were meant to sort of clip it and just give the bare essentials, but all the same, thank you for all the nice things that you said. Why did I write this book? I've always been very passionate about handlooms and textiles ever since I can remember. Even as a child, or even when I was growing up, those days we all wore saris very early. I would love to wear my mother's saris rather than the chiffons and georgettes, and people would ask me why I'm dressed up like an old woman, but that's how I was. Maybe there's something in my blood that, I loved being traditional. And of course, my work took me to a lot of places. I happened to open a boutique in Chennai, which was the first one really. And it gave me the scope of traveling through India, through, pockets, sometimes even traveling in a jatka and in a, not really a bullock cart, but, very primitive ways of travel, buses and so on, to get to the pockets, because the soul of India lies in the gullies and streets, not really in the big malls. So yes, I discovered all this. I sat with the weavers, ate with them, and enjoyed being with them, listening to their stories. And I said, yes, one day I must write about them. And yeah, those days it was commercial, but about 21, 22 years ago, I gave up everything and decided that I should work hereafter for people like, the weavers who are the underprivileged. And something happened, during the time I was running my boutique. The weavers, of course, had a hit after the British left, because they left them in a state of penury. There were hardly any looms to talk about. Till Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay restored it and opened she became chairman of the Handicrafts Board, and Pupil Jayakar was chairperson of the Handloom Board. And they sort of revived it. But then afterwards, again, there was a dip, because people had stopped wearing saris, they stopped caring for handlooms, and they reached out mostly for synthetics, and they wore jeans and so on. And the weavers were in a state of, utter despair, because their looms were not functioning and so on. So I thought, as a writer or an activist that I choose to call myself, I should do something to make people aware of the value of handlooms and how much of sweat and blood goes into the weaving of a single sari. So I did the best I can. I wrote a play called The Song of the Loom, and it was premiered in Chennai about 8 years ago. And this was done by the Madras Players, who are the leading English theatre company in India. They are the oldest, rather. And so I was very happy with it. To me, it was the first time I saw, my words coming onto the stage and acted out by people like P.C. Ramakrishna, who encouraged me and said that it was for a cause. Then at the end of the play, we found people having tears in their eyes, and they came up to me and said, what can we do? What can we do to help you? So I said, yeah, please contact me. We will do it. But public memory is short. And after that, the same people didn't really come back to form a team as I wanted to. So we wanted to take the play across India, but the cast was too large and the economy took a nosedive. So we couldn't really take the play everywhere. So then I was disappointed, but I thought I'll do the next best thing, which is to write a book, a novel. And then it is fiction and real life woven together. And I dare not make it too real and quote names because I thought the book would get banned and government would sit up and notice, because this was in Jayalalitha's time. But maybe it would have been a good idea, because if the book was banned, it would have got more publicity and more attention. So anyway, so that's what happened. And that's how I think it answers your question, Kalpana. That's how I started writing the book. And yeah.
Wonderful. So it's nice. So all your experiences really push you to go and talk about these viewers, right? Wonderful. So, okay. And the next question is, did you end up doing extra research on anything presented in the book? If so, what did you find?
When you write a book, you have to research. You can't just take it out from the top of your head. If you write short stories, maybe yes. But even then, it's based on something you have felt, something that has moved you to put it into words. And yes, I did do a lot of research. See, even if you don't take everything that you research, it gives you a background. It gives you an understanding, a feeling, a passion to write the story. So yes, I did research, but my own experience with weavers and seeing them and listening to them, was kind of imprinted in my mind. So it was not that hard. And then when they were going through this problem, when they lost their jobs and the looms were not working at all and not running, I knew exactly what had happened. So I just had to press the memory recall button. So that was how it went.
Can you throw some light on Tilak, the two protagonists? Yeah, there are even Ponni and Sundari, yes. But this juncture, can you throw light on our two protagonists, the male, that is Kulashekara, the master weaver, and Tilak, the IAS officer. And Sabita ma'am, should we have a clip from your play actually. After you speak, probably we'll play the clip.
Yeah. No, to those who have not read the book, it centers around the two protagonists. One is the IAS officer Tilak, and who is passionate about handlooms, and then his friendship with his the master weaver Kulasekara, who has been overlooked for the national award and things like that. And these two share a very great bond with one another. And the story goes on, and it's about two disparate families. The IAS officer, who's a middle class person and with a wife and two children. And there you have Kulasekara and Ponni literally in rags and in a state of penury with their two children, and their sufferance I have chronicled in this in the book. So those are the two central characters and the conflict that arises at every turn. Yeah, you can show the clip. You want to show the clip of
yeah, we'll teaching you can play. Yeah.
I'm going to play, just say whether it's audible.
Where were you all day? Look here, I'm talking to you. Can you hear? I asked you a question.
But I don't have to answer you.
Must have been a Tilak I asked.
If you are so sure, why do you ask her?
Why all those long talks with him, huh? Has anything good come out of it?
You keep out of matters that do not concern you, Mama.
Concern me? This is my concern, huh? Where are those two children? Muttu! Lakshmi! Not here. Those two children are also my concern. Do you hear? They have had only one meal today. When I finish singing these jasmines, Lakshmi will carry them around the village. I've started to chant. Poo, Malipuma, Madumalli.
I do not like the idea of children going out selling things, particularly Lakshmi. ஒரு வயசு பொண்ணு பிள்ளை மறந்துட்டியா?
எனக்கு என்ன தெரியாதா? Pride, ego, dignity. Don't sell flowers, children. What will people think? Lakshmi is a big girl, can't afford to have her paraded on the street. Don't sell saris for me. What will people say? Don't work as a servant for me. How can the wife of Kulashekara, master weaver, sink to such a low
Will you
level?
listen to me?
I am tired of listening to you. Tired. Now I have to do something for my children, even if it means selling my body and my soul.
என்ன சொல்ற?
Don't you dare! Be careful.
I have been patient for too long. I should have done this long ago.
You must listen to this. The government has sanctioned 2 more cooperatives to weave low-cost veshtis and saris. This would mean 200 looms would go into production and once the order becomes official. Unless there are takers for the increased production, stocks would pile up. You understand the implication? What a grim picture. Kulashekara? Ba Kulashekara, ba inge ukkarappa.
Kalpana, do you want me to continue playing this clip also?
Yeah, actually that should have come first
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, you can finish this then.
This is what we can just continue. This is the clip we were looking for. That is
This is the one.
Kulashekara.
Oh,
Kulashekara and Tilak's relationship, the conversation between them, their friendship. Yeah, we'll play this, TG, continue this.
How long do we know each other, Kulashekara? 25? 30 years? We are friends, Kulashekara. Not master and servant. Yet every time I ask you to sit, you refuse to sit alongside me.
It is impossible for me, ஐயா. நீங்க என் குரு. எவ்வளவோ நீ செஞ்சிருக்கிறீங்க. How can I not respect you, ஐயா? When you were in service and both of us were young, you used to get angry if we did not weave with bhakti, if we were careless in our work. It was you who taught us perfection and commitment to work despite bad times. Why, ayya, even now you get angry.
It was a lesson which went down especially well with you, my friend. You are blessed with talent. You're a master weaver. You're the best weaver in Madikulam district. Why? The whole of South India may not have someone like you. Every time my wife wears a traditional sari, she never fails to draw a compliment. Thanks to you, Kulashekara. Yes, I do feel sad when the weavers do not honor their profession.
நீங்க தான் என்ன பாராட்டுறீங்க ஐயா. ஆனா கவர்மெண்ட்ல இருந்து எனக்கு நேஷனல் மாஸ்டர் வீவர் அவார்ட் கிடைக்கலீங்களே.
Does it matter, Kulashekara? To be recognized by the government, earn a citation in cash, you need the right context. You need recommendation from high places. It just does not happen by itself. I understand it must be fairly hard for you to cope with financially.
ஐயா, we have no option but to form cooperatives. Otherwise the government order will not apply to us. We will all benefit by weaving the low cost sari and veshti, ஐயா. Orders வந்துகிட்டே இருக்கும். நாங்க பட்னியா இருக்க மாட்டோம் பாருங்க. I can mobilize 100 weavers straight away.
Is that what you want? No creativity, no choice of color, yarn or design? Weave the same stereotypes like automatic vending machines?
என்ன செய்ய முடியும் ஐயா? Suffering is an old friend, day in and day out.
Thank you, Srinivas.
that's fantastic.
The last clip we saw, those are the 2 protagonists, and they are, it sort of gives you a glimpse as to how they cared for each other, and yet the conflict, because Tilak doesn't want them to join government cooperatives because he can foresee what is going to happen. And this man is pushed by all the other weavers because they are starving. And if they join the cooperatives, there would be a steady income for them. So this is a question I ask myself also. When these weavers are suffering, many times they come to me and say, you have your ideals, you say handloom, handloom, handloom all the time. If only we can get into the power mill group, life would be easier. We'd be producing more stuff, we'd be earning more. And then you ask yourself, do you want them to starve and die? Or do you want them to carry on to deviate? It's a very debatable question. That's why I feel handlooms, we should not lose handlooms, because these are a paramparic, it's a heritage skills which should not be lost. But we'll have to increase the wages of the weaver, and they might have to cater to a niche, niche customer audience, so to speak. We can't cater to everybody, though handloom should be available to the rich and to the poor. And the first clip that you saw, that is a debate between Kulasekara and Ponni, because she is so upset with him that he will not listen and not succumb to governmental pressure. And he's always looking to his mentor, for that. And Ponni vents her spleen and on him. And then she kind of talks to Kandan, her son, about, how careless he is about the plight of the weavers. I'll just read a little bit from the book. It wounded Kulasekara's ego to hear Ponni talk the way she did, and that too to Kandan. Wasn't it she who decided to marry him? Her belligerence was hard to bear, heaped as it were on an already tough existence. She kept forcing him to use the money earned by Kandan. Kandan is his son. And to Kulasekara, it was almost like tainted money, because it was not money earned from handlooms. It was a corporate job. And he warned Ponni not to touch any of it. Whenever the rice tins were full, and when he spied vegetables in the basket, he knew it was Kandan's contribution. He tried to turn a blind eye, but was consumed with overladen guilt. Voices were raised to a high pitch, and Kandan's voice was gruff with emotion. So this is the son who sees things in a very practical way, and yet he does believe that his father had this faith that handloom should continue. It was a paramparic skill, but he knew that these skills are not going to feed hungry mouths. So he wants to get into a corporate job and look after the family, and at the same time encourage the skills. So this is another, conflict which arises in the book. So
yeah, I had these conflicts written down. In fact, I was wondering, in your experience with the master weavers for close to 40, 45 years, what do you propose? How do you think one can resolve this conflict between tradition versus practicality, the conflict between creativity and livelihood? So what is that you think can really help?
Only way, Kalpana, is to, whenever I get the chance and I get the chance to talk to the weavers in their language, I tell them that they should have pride in their heritage. I'm afraid in India, like most of us, take our heritage artifacts and our skills and the artisans for granted. We are not as proud as, say, Western countries. Now they can have a few stones here and there, and they sort of put labels on it, and then they make it a tourist spot and so on. And India has so much to show, but they don't. And I'm really disappointed. And it is because of this lacuna in us that we are not able to appreciate what we have. Gar ki murgi dal barabar is a saying that often goes. Now, in our own Madras Museum in Egmore, it's a beautiful museum. We have some of the best Chola bronzes there. But when you go and when you take the tourists and want to show them textiles, there isn't anything. There isn't anything. So why is it like that? Look at the Calico Museum in Ahmedabad. That is one very good thing they've had. So to answer your question, what is the thing? As I told you before, we have to increase the wages of the weavers. And what will happen is the saris or the fabric will cost more. But we have to pay for something that is handcrafted. We can't help that. There's no two ways. So what happens is, as I said, we'll be catering only to a niche buyer, group of buyers, not everybody. But I'll tell you, some of these weavers that I helped during the pandemic, they were making saris, for something as cheap as 750 rupees, and which are beautiful sarees, really beautiful. So that is the only way I see out of it.
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah. Marketing, that's where we really need to, marketing is what we really lack probably, right?
You're right. That is another thing. We have to learn how to market the goods.
Sabita ma'am,
Yeah.
we can't hear you. Yeah, now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? No? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we are able to hear you. Kalpana, we are able to hear you.
Okay. No, we have to help them market, because what happens is they are floundering because they are not aware of the market today. It's a very bewildering market to them. So when I did this Weavers initiative, I taught them about the market. I taught them certain skills, how to sell, how to get online, and that helped. And even when I do design intervention, I tell them you can't hold on to only traditional designs. You've got to change a bit. You've got to come down to something a little contemporary, but still use your marketing skills. I mean, use your traditional skills. And marketing is a very big aspect. And now I'm trying to develop a scheme where professionals can come and teach them how to market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Judy
Wonderful.
Frater did that for the embroiderers in Bhuj. And after the earthquake in 2001, the whole village was sort of rebuilt. And you could just write to them and go online and order. I've ordered a lot of things from them. So I would like our weavers as well to get onto this bandwagon and be able to sell directly.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. Kulashekara wanted to win the Master Weavers National Award. In the story, he really wants that recognition, the celebration that comes with. He also mentions how Gurappa, the Kalamkari artist, has got won the national award, and he so much wants it. So, in your personal experience, you have definitely come across master weavers. So, does these what does these awards, cash, citation mean to them?
See, it means a lot, because for them, recognition is a big thing. And what happens is someone has to recommend them. Someone has to suggest that this person is good. Then comes the formality where they have to show their work. They have to show what they've produced. And supposing I recommend somebody, a master weaver, I have to look into his work and say, you produced this because this is one of your best. So they start by sending photographs. A national award, if it's a government award, then they have to be extra careful, because they have to take the original sample, send it to them, and make sure it comes back to them. And then there are a panel of judges who look at the various criteria, and they give them a citation, they give them a cash award. Sometimes it goes down to about 50,000 or so. Then this other weaver whom I have worked with in Kalakshetra, he is a fantastic weaver, Bhanumurthy, who developed a shuttle, which is not mechanized, but it's a sort of automatic shuttle when weaving the Porvai Kanjivaram saris, where if you put it on, it automatically zigzags and comes back to the person who's throwing the shuttle. Because normally a Porvai saris have 3 people around to manage. But here you can do 1 person or 2 people can do that. So he got the national award. Then in our own group, Crafts Council of India is an apex body and has about 13 affiliated councils. We give Kamla awards to people. And so we suggest, the members of Crafts Council can suggest, we have an awards ceremony and so on. And it means hell of a lot to them, because as I said, Gurappa was about the only person who was doing this fantastic Kalamkari in Kalahasti. But when he got the national award, what happened is, some of the other, painters who were equally good, they were just sidelined because this man was a national award. So it means a lot to them to be recognized.
So, see, one interesting thing about your book itself, it had the observation was everywhere, you know, and what really struck me personally is this the cannonball tree, the queen of the night tree. This is very incredibly unique to me, according to me. So, in what period of life were you exposed to these sweet-smelling, flowering trees?
I've been exposed to the Nagalingam poo ever since I can remember. My maternal grandfather used to go out on walks, and every day he used to come with this beautiful purple flower, and my mother used to put it in a saucer of water, and we used to keep smelling it. And after I got married, of course, it was our walks in the Theosophical Society, which has such a variety of trees and so on. And this Nagalingam poo there is very, very prominent. And of course, we are not supposed to pluck it, but then we used to just walk around it and smell it. And my description of the place where Sundari walks every morning is the Theosophical Society. I mean, many people who know that TS will recognize it.
Yeah. I can, you know, there is a Nagalingam tree there in the Theosophical Society.
Yeah, more than one. Then I just wanted to tell you the relationship between Kandan and his father. He loves his father, but he's exasperated by him. So I'll just read a bit and you'll understand the significance of the relationship. Kandan recalled the times when his father and he had fun times. He taught him to play marbles, how to beat others at the game. He taught him to fly kites. They would run together holding the string and getting the kite aloft. They would make the manja together, strong twine smeared with glass powder, which would cut the strings of other kites. He taught Kandan how to protect his hands from being cut. They would scout for open spaces, and there was one near the village tank with a huge peepal tree under which they would rest whenever they tired. Kulasekara would hold the kite and then let go and teach Kandan how to run with it in the direction of the wind, helping it sail upwards. When my kite soared up, its little red tail fluttering in the wind, I remember you would shout, "Let go, Kanda, let go, de-loadeda." That's a saying, which meant he had to relax his hold on the string and allow the kite its freedom. And I did. Now I am asking you, my father, let it go, de-loadeda, Udaya. Kulasekara wiped his moist eyes. I will, my son, I will. It's time I did. So that was the conclusion of, what they had to do.
Nice. Yeah. Also that I noticed a lot of Tamil words, manja, diludada, dabra, jolna pai, there's which I don't find in normal, the usage is so beautiful, especially for people who know Tamil, probably it strikes a chord. So that's also very interesting in your writing, actually. So Arivur, how did this fictional name happen? Like Arivur, is it Arivur plus Ur?
Yeah, you might say so. It could be, but it was a name just came to me. It's not a real village. It's a fictitious village.
Okay.
And since I've seen village life and I've gone there and see what they do, so it was easy for me to sort of conjure up my own picture.
Nice. Okay. In there's so many 25 to 30 characters almost in your book. Who do you relate the most? Who do you relate to the least?
That's a very difficult question because it's a mix. See, when you write a book, it need not be autobiographical, but it is something that you feel deeply about, and you do put something of yourself there. Now, Tilak, with his passion for handlooms, there was somebody who read the book and told me, you're Tilak. I know you made him a man in your book, but it's you. No, but I would also look at the practical aspect. I would not be blinded by just passion and idealism and so on. But yes, I was passionate about handlooms, and I did feel that, one should carry this on. And in a way, I'm like Sundari, the homemaker who's, doing things and worried about the children not getting married, about their future. But yes, I relate to Tilak more than anything else, more than anyone else, any other character.
And the person you relate to the least, the character you relate to the least.
Oh, Mariappan, the village lender,
Mm,
leads them and gets, he's a
yeah.
fat lump of corruption. That's what he is.
Yeah. Okay, see, we find the main protagonist is very highly idealistic. He is a highly skilled craftsman, a perfectionist, and he gives most importance to the family prestige at the cost of his own family. Like, do you even approve of his ideal? Like, is it fair to be so idealistic at the cost of their
No.
thing?
No, I just put it there because sometimes it's a human failing. People get carried away by their own passions, their own whims, and they are sort of wearing blinkers. They cannot see how it affects the family. And he's got a daughter called Dikshita who follows in his footsteps. She's very much almost a clone of Tilak, but not quite so, because she has the right values and she belongs to the next gen. So she always tells him, Appa, it's not like that anymore. Things have changed. She's going to a design school in Baroda, and they've taught them to understand certain things, like understand marketing, giving the artisan marketing skills, and also being practical, veering away from very traditional designs and going forth, making, like, for instance, a lot of my weavers, I keep telling them, why do you weave just saris? Why don't you do dress material? Why don't you do dress material with very difficult to weave borders, like 4-way borders? People can make them into dresses, make them into salwar suits, which is what most people are weaving today. But the thing is, once the loom is set up, it is of a certain width, and you can weave about 22.5 meters, and you sometimes weave throughout the year on that particular loom to cover the cost. It's about 80,000 to set up a full loom. So they don't want to keep changing it. So I used to give them multiples, use the same loom to make fabric and make it multiples of the same thing. I mean, you can make 2 widths instead of just 1, and in between run a border. There are ways, but the thing I found with the weavers is this mindset. They have a mindset which is very difficult to break. They do not like to succumb to pressure. When you approach these weavers, you have to be very careful not to offend them, and also realize that each one of them is an artist in his own right. You cannot ram down his throat your own designs and things. And once they trust you, they'll give their lives for you. Like when we used to go, my husband always traveled with me, because I think he was always afraid that I'd lose my way, and I'm quite stupid about things like that. I definitely will. And going into these villages and traveling anyhow, he felt it was not safe. Whether he was interested in or not, he came as a protector, and he would also sit and talk to the weavers. See, they trusted me because I used to sit with them, eat with them, sit cross-legged those days on the floor with them, and talk to them in their language. So they knew, okay, here's somebody who's also doing something commercial, but she's interested in our welfare. So what I used to do is, when we ordered something, like I gave the design of certain weaving saris and things like that, I could not absorb all that they needed to make it commercially viable for them. Because my boutique was a small outlet, and I had this thing of 1 of a kind or 2 of a kind. So I used to tell them, once you give me the promised consignment, you just take my designs and weave. They will sell, and you can give it to other people. And there were always some people following me to see where I was going, what I was doing, what designs I give. So actually, plagiarism is a form of flattery. You think, my designs are good enough for people to copy. You can't help that. In this commercial world, you just can't help it. So it's a question of dealing with, and now what I find is, like, even in Facebook, I'm not, a great Facebook person, though I love to read certain things written by people I know, and particularly my young nieces, uh, like Kirtana and Aarti and all that. I love reading what they write. I feel something strongly. I just park my thoughts on the Facebook page, and I'm ashamed to say that sometimes I don't even go there to see what kind of responses there are or to thank people enough for this. It's just like that. But the social media is extremely powerful. But I have found that people are more inclined to possess these things. They are sometimes interested in the weave so that they can, this ownership thing. And I feel they should also be interested in the creator, his welfare, because let's face it, it's because of him you got it. And in India, again, the sad thing is they're all nameless, all artisans. You see beautiful architecture and temples, but you don't know who built them. You only know of the Raja who commissioned them. Have they ever given prominence to any person who has done that? Likewise, the weavers, but wherever I'm involved, I give the name of the weaver. If I have an exhibition, when I used to have exhibitions, I would bring them to the fore, make them mingle with the audience and say, this is the man who did this, bring them face to, because let's face it, everyone needs recognition. Everyone is happy when they, get this. So that is the way I have operated. And if everyone else does it, handlooms has a future, have a future.
Yeah, that's a very positive thing. I'm actually sure like it has definitely impacted me too. Like I would definitely look out for a handloom, consciously now. Probably if I've seen it somewhere, picking it up is different. But then going and picking up, I'm sure the more the book is definitely going to help a lot more weavers here with this audience here also, I'm sure. So one more intriguing question for me is like you were able to give innumerable characters. They were like, close to 25 to 28 characters in a brief also, or somebody very elaborate. How did you even, and they're very strong characters. Each one has a definite personality to them. You have ensured that you were able to communicate that. So what really made, what kind of exposure, I am wondering what kind of experiences and exposure that you had that you could really write so beautifully, describe each of these characters. So just throw some light on how did this come about, like if it can be Kanta in a yellow bucket, the water going into the yellow bucket, as simple as that.
Kalpana, I think you're giving me more credit than is due to me, but I'll tell you, every writer does this. See, when you write, you observe a lot, you observe life. Like when I was a child and going on the train, I always loved writing. And if I was going on a train, I look at the people opposite me and I'll make up stories about them. And if I see a man scowling at his wife, I'll say, this man is not treating his wife properly. Probably they're having an issue and so on. So it's like that. And in my life, I think I've been blessed that I've had a colorful life. I've traveled a lot in India. And I have worked with these weavers, as I've told you, not just in South India, but through India, all over. So each one has a different kind of personality. And I have absorbed it. And then I have given that characters to my people in the book. So, I like even observing the maids who come to work for me and their background and what they go through. You look at them, the way they are dressed. Of course, today's maids are more fashionably dressed. And one maid I had, see how this impact is. When I was doing the Weavers Initiative, I made a catalog with all their products after teaching them how to shoot and how to put these things online. So this maid said, Amma, you're doing so much for the handloom weaver. I will order from the weaver. I said, no, because they are expensive. You go and buy your synthetics or your salwar suit, but your hard-earned money, I'll buy you one, but you can't take 4 or 5 because you can't afford it. She said, who said I can't afford it? I definitely can afford it. When you buy, you do things, let me. You don't have to buy for me. What am I earning the salary for? Let me also help them. I was amazed. So she saw one sari I was wearing. She liked it and she asked me how to do it. So I connected the weaver to her. And she ordered the sari, and that fellow even gave her a discount. Then she ordered 3 more. Then she's telling me, you got a sari like that. Let us both wear the same sari on that day and we'll put it up in Facebook. I said, like hell you will. And I was just thinking to myself, she was a very pretty girl. Both of us wore saris and we opened the door for some delivery person. He'll wonder who's the lady of the house and who's the maid. It was like that. So see, look at that, that inspired even the working class. That I was very touched about. I said, just look at this. It doesn't happen so easily. So maybe the impact I had talking to them about this. So I think wherever we get the opportunity, we should talk. If we can write, we should write. Because let us not lose this precious heritage. I don't think we should.
Yeah, that's a very funny and very nice share that you had, the instant that you had. So amazing. This Song of the Loom, that is the play, The Looms of Arivur was adapted into a play and it ran to full houses for 3 full days, right? So which cinema director do you think is capable of directing a movie version of your book, The Looms of Arivur?
Oh, I think that's a very ambitious thing, but I feel that if they did movies like this, the movies have a fantastic effect. You know that. I mean, some of it stays in your mind. Like about the time my Song of the Loom was being staged, there was a movie called Kanjivaram. I don't know whether you people have seen it. It was with Prakash Raj. And when Hindu carried it, people first thought it was mine. So our play got even more publicity because of that, because they don't look too closely. It was a story of a weaver and what he goes through. He says that he wants to weave a wedding sari for his daughter, but he hasn't got the money. So he, every time he goes and weaves, he takes a bit of silk yarn and puts it in his mouth. And ultimately, he finishes the sari and he hides it from the person who's employed him. And what happens is they go into such problems and dire poverty that one day, and she's sick, that girl, he mixes poison in the food and actually feeds her. It was awful. It was so gruesome. And she dies. And finally, this wedding sari he takes and covers her with it. So that is the kind of thing they face. They're driven to the wall. Like people in Benares, the weavers were committing suicide because the Chinese people were making very cheap imitations of Benares saris, and Benares saris can be very expensive. So people who didn't know any better were buying them. So they were hijacking our South Indian weavers also to make Porvai saris in China. So as I say, this is something that is where they started this patenting of certain saris, like the Kanjivaram. It has the tag where you can't really reproduce, but you can't really stop people from copying. That happens all the time.
Yeah, okay. Would you like to read, there's several beautiful passages. Would you want to read 1 or 2 from your book? Like,
which did you like? What did you like?
I liked several. I like the last bit. I have even put it on the Alchemist Book Club, wherever it rang a bell to me. Like, I like the last bit also in the epilogue, the last bit.
But we won't.
I like this on page 75.
Okay, I'll read this because to me, this is what I thought about. Weaving traditions existed for centuries as the excavations from Mohenjo-daro proved. A scrap of madderite cloth wrapped round a silver pot was discovered, preserved by the metallic salts that impregnated the pot, which acted like a mordant. Paramparic skills were handed over from father to son to son. Nothing was ever documented, not in those days. Oral tradition, secrets and techniques passed on for generations. It would be sacrilege for a son even to even think he would not carry on the tradition. To Tilak, the loom symbolized, to Tilak and to Sabita, the loom symbolized a musical instrument waiting to be coaxed. The thrill of anticipation blossoms into creativity as design possibilities stretch into endless panoramas. The musician, in this case, the humble weaver, sits on his hard seat, cajoling his loom into producing the finest of fabric as he throws his shuttle back and forth with the rhythm in his heart, giving gentle tugs at the jala, keeping in tune with the tal. He runs his hand over the symmetry and sighs in wonder at his own creation. This then is the raga of the loom. The cosmos, the ordered universe, is a fabric which stretches endlessly with its warp and weft, forming a grid pattern upon which life is painted in all its illusions and never-ending cycles. Thread and weaving occupied a hallowed place, and the mysticism exists even today, linking traditional Indian textiles with religion. Tilak had written about this so many times that he knew the lines by heart. Textiles inspired the poet in him.
That's lovely. That's really musical and beautifully written. So the Raga of the Loom, we just have a couple of questions and then we'll open to the participants here.
Yeah.
So I just have a few questions, like just a brief glimpse about what is about Raga of the Loom. What is the book about?
Raga of the Loom, I wrote some 8 years ago. It is more for the lay person to understand about the various textiles that we have in India. And every state has its own expression. Every state in India, there's such a diversity in textiles, in the feel of it, the texture, the kind of, threads that they use. It's so different. It's got its own fashion statement, so to speak. So what I felt is, like, sometimes I, host foreigners in my home. I have my own exhibits of my collected textiles over the years. I show a PowerPoint presentation. And they are just so fascinated that they can touch something and see, and they ask so many questions, but they haven't a clue. They haven't a clue as to what it's like and how it's made. So it's very difficult to pack in 2 hours everything that you want to tell them about textiles. And even our own people, as I told you, this ownership thing rides high. They don't want to know about the textiles. So Raga of the Loom was written where I covered the major textiles I can't cover everything, but just the major ones, so that with pictures, so that people will be able to identify them. It's not a scholarly book, it's not a textbook, but it's a gist of everything. And at the end of it, I've had it weaver stories and so on. But that was written about 8 years ago, and I'm extremely bad at, getting publishers or writing to them to get it. So that's been lying, so to speak, in the cans, and I hope one day I will get it published. So that is the thing. You asking me, I didn't answer. You said which director would you look for?
Yeah, that was also lingering.
I really want somebody to do this, even as a documentary, it doesn't matter, or some kind of film which will be impacting and make people aware of the need to, perpetuate handlooms. Yeah, I was even thinking of Suhasini and Mani Ratnam and all. They do things for social causes, and anybody who can take this up, anybody who is interested in the cause can take it up. I'm not very particular. You aim for the stars and you can end up somewhere.
Nice. All the best. And so the last question: where can one buy the looms of Areekode? Where is your book available?
I'm glad you asked that question. Right now they are with me, because what happened, as soon as the book, we had a small book launch, and I think you attended, and Hindu gave a very good review. So I was so happy. Unfortunately, see, things go against us, so that is what is intended. The pandemic struck. So people were writing to me, and I said, you just let me know. I will courier the books, because I had this weird publisher who made me buy my own books. But 150 books I bought, I paid for courier charges for each one of the books. So when I told them, even the couriers were not working then. So there was no way I could send it. And when the interest is there, it's nice to be able to sell the books. But after that, as I tell you, public memory is short. There's so many other things to do. And everyone was so anxious during the pandemic. This book was far from my mind. So yeah, I have books, and I can send you autographed books if you so want, and you send the address. You have my email ID. It's in the club. So you can
Yeah.
just let me know.
Sure. Yeah, that will be good. I'm sure people will want to read after this beautiful session. So now, TG, we can take questions from everybody. So
Yeah,
you can
sure, sure.
unmute.
Sure,
And-
Kalpana, it's been a very, very engaging conversation between both of you, and we are all sitting in the audience seat and enjoying how two ladies are talking about the sari and the people who make the sari and their life. Excellent. It's beautiful. It's open to the forum now in order to interact with the author. And
PG, I've been also encouraging people to weave handloom dhotis.
okay, that's
Dhotis,
great.
yes. And during the pandemic, I wear dhotis at home with short kurtas, handloom ones. They're beautiful. So
Yeah,
the
it's
men-
actually a nice idea, man. In fact, what you shared in terms of why are you weaving only the saris, why not you going after some new styles and things? It's a wonderful idea. I mean, we can never disassociate handloom with sari for some reason, but to people to think of new ways of producing as well as marketing is the need of the hour, like what you said, because it affects really the lives, right? Which is beautifully captured in your book. Ma'am, we have Sata who's asking a question for you. So let me ask Sata, would you like to go first?
Yeah, TG, thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am, and it was very interesting. I've been listening you talk and explain things. Just couple of questions. This is a question, for the author and you. How long you took to write this book? And the second question is, which part of the day you do this writing part in your busy schedule?
in my conversation with Kalpana, I was telling her I'm disciplined in all other ways, but I'm not a disciplined writer, because basically I cannot neglect the home and the family. So, a woman is never done. So I would take my computer, put it on the dining table, start writing. But writing is a lonely preoccupation. Unless you are alone with your thoughts and with your characters, you can't write. It's not like, any other kind of writing. So yes, how long did I take? I took about a year, but I took longer to get it published, to find the right person. And there are many authors who tell me that they devote 3 hours a day for writing exclusively. No one is to disturb them. But I'm not that kind of person. I always have people and something or the other. So my best hours of writing was, I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning, do my yoga, my exercise, whatever, and then even go for a walk and come. And I would get in a good 1.5 hours of writing in the morning. Then night time, and those days I didn't watch any television. I read the papers for the news. I wanted to know what's going on in the world, but never, because my husband was always busy with, his news and his sports, and then all these, some of these horrible murders and crime stories. And my mother was with her serials. So I never had a chance, not that I thirsted for it, but that was an added advantage. I used to sit till about 10:30, 11 to write. And that was the moments I really loved to do that. So you have to persist. And as I was telling Kalpana yesterday when we talked, the characters decide where you want to go. She asked me whether I have a disciplined plot and go according. No, it's not like that. It just takes you. The characters think for you. They start moving, they start acting, and you listen to them. They come alive. You know, it's a very strange feeling, but that's how it is.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I think Anu, you have raised your hand. Would you like to go in and ask your question? Anu? Anu, can you hear us? Okay, I think she is busy. Okay, so and this is in connection to the question what Kalpana also shared. As I began to read the book, okay, in the first 2-3 chapters itself, you have introduced a lot of characters. I know during the conversation today, you were talking about, you said that, there are people who are nameless and they would like to have that recognition. Is it a feeling that, you want to give a recognition to them that you introduce so many characters? Because in such a small book, is it by purpose that you have named everyone? It's not like they have come and gone. And no, it's not like that. Everybody has a name. Is it by decision or is it your nature, or what motivated you to give a name for every character?
See, for instance, like in a cluster, there are about 30, 40 of them. Okay. And some of them feel slighted when they are not named, because it's only the master weaver who, provides work for them and, does everything. He's the one who gets the recognition. Now, even in this weavers initiative, I could not coordinate with 100 weavers all the time. I sort of adopted 4 clusters, and each cluster I appointed one person of integrity to communicate with me and tell me what their wants are. So I felt that the others felt left out. Now, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have traveled to each cluster, spoken to them and listened to them. But since that was not to be, you can't help it. So yes, in my novel, I have named quite a few. Actually, I must go back and count how many, because
Kalpana counted. I think she said 26, isn't it, Kalpana?
Yeah,
I counted, it was close to 25 names, 25 to 30 in fact. I've written down their names. Even it can be the one who is just, everybody who comes in and goes.
Everybody who's
Broker
selling
also, the marriage broker,
flowers.
Maria, his name is also written. I have written it down.
no. Are you counting just the weavers, or you're counting all
the characters?
Name, whichever name has appeared in your book is been written down here.
Yeah.
To an extent, I have at least 25 to 30 names.
Yeah. So if I rewrite the book ever, I'll write little stories about each of these characters, so that will be a story within a story. I think that will work out quite well. But in the play, we reduced everything. We can't do that can't have so many characters.
Yeah.
And the Khurshid part, Tilak's, tryst with this girl, Muslim girl that he fell in love with, that we omitted entirely, because in a play of 1.5 hours, you can't just introduce this and shut off. So whereas in the book, it's there.
Yeah.
So I feel it adds to a story when you have characters like this. And because it's a village scene, I might not have done it if it was a story in a city or a big city and so on. There'd be limited characters. But with these fellows, each one of them saying something or the other, and each one had something different to say. Right. So that comes out, what they each one wanted to say. If you give them a name, how each one felt differently. I think Anu is free now, if she still wants to ask something.
Sure. Anu, please go ahead and ask a question, please. Okay, let's move on to Tara then, because Tara wants to ask a question to you, madam. Yeah, go ahead, Tara. Tara, can you hear me? You are on mute, so you may need to unmute and.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Savitika, I have not read the book as yet, as like you said, we couldn't get to it. I wanted to know whether the condition of the weavers that you have written about, it would probably apply to almost all the weavers across the country.
Yes.
To a great extent.
See, it's very pronounced in South India, whereas in Telangana, in Andhra, weavers are not doing all that badly. They are surviving. You see, you take our ikats, one classic example, Kuttapaka. They are doing quite well. They haven't. And then certain parts of North India, like the Bandhani still are selling. And then what else? Ajrak is selling. So it is certain pockets, like here, certain portions in Andhra also, like Chirala, they are suffering. And I feel it's very marked in Tamil Nadu,
What about places like, the Patola weaving? Now, that's something very, very exclusive. Does this apply to a large number of people who are doing these kind of very exclusive weaving also?
See,
or are they better supported?
Exclusive weaving, they have a market because each Patola sari goes into lakhs, and that is part of the trousseau. So they work it to order. See, and I'll give you an example. Now this Kodali Karpur, which I'm going to talk about, if anyone interested in textiles, on Handloom Day, I'm opening with that. First part will be history. Second part will be the Kodali Karpur. It's a language textile for about 1,000 years. And I kind of revived it, did a replica of it in Kalakshetra because I had the master weaver there who was very good, and Vanudi, who did the shuttle, got the national award. I got a person from Weaver Service Center who was an excellent person for natural dyes and printing. Then I got a man from Kasi who was a painter. So we were a formidable team and I was heading the team. So we did this as a collective and we brought out the sari, which is very difficult to produce. At that time, the sari cost us 1.5 lakhs. We were selling it at Kalakshetra, not me, Kalakshetra. I had 7 people queuing up for the sari. Kalakshetra, again being government, they did not encourage me to repeat the sari. We would have sold, they would have got a profit. They didn't do it. So one is there at the museum. It was done with a lot of fanfare. They said, oh, we have produced the sari and so on. But apart from that, nothing else. So this kind of apathy is there. I don't know why this is. So what I did is I did the next best thing. I got them to print the Kodali Karpur just using blocks, not with the usual technique. We sold about 600 saris a month. I made them do it on Chanderi and Maheshwari saris. They were beautiful and in natural dyes. So I'm just giving you an example of how things can evolve and what we can do. And I feel we should pay a lot of attention to our, our national textiles which have languished. The Korvai, for instance, I kind of, in some way, I brought it back. And it's very difficult. And one of the weavers whom I mentored got an award from WICCI for weaving a double korvai. A korvai itself is difficult. To do a double korvai is twice as hard. So it means that the skill is still here, but we should train them. The people who are older should train the younger ones to be able to master this, because it is such a, I can't tell you what a precious skill this is. And we shouldn't lose it. Otherwise, it will be lost forever. Like in Thailand, they have a silk, I forget the name, but they market it so well that it sells at a very expensive, label, and it's sold at airports and everything. It's nothing. It's just a piece of silk woven well. But we have so many other things. We have so many other fabric to show. But sadly enough, as I said, we don't know how to project. Yes, I see more hands. Good, that's nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tara. And can we have some? Kalpana. Can we have Sampath? Who raised his hand to go ahead?
It was an amazing read and so filled with emotions. In fact, we are in talks with artisans from Hyderabad to do for utensils part and handicrafts in Gujarat and help them in marketing. And also there is a technique called neuro-linguistic programming through which we try to help them do better. So by any chance, if there is a possibility of helping them on the marketing front, we will do it absolutely free. We will try helping them out in whatever way we can.
Wonderful. That will be wonderful.
And, because we are trying to see that all these people see the light of the day for what they produce.
Yeah.
so unfair. They produce for 40 rupees and get sold in the market for 4,000 rupees, and they don't make any money in this.
Yeah, true.
So
Absolutely.
I'm part of the book club, so obviously I will definitely be sharing the number with you, and please let me know. I'll be more than happy being part of it and see
Yes.
that they see the light of the day.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
amazing, Sampath. Thank you. Thank you so much. You can connect with the
thank
ma'am
you.
and take it
No,
forward.
definitely we will do it. We'll make it happen. Not to worry.
Thank you for offering this.
I think, ma'am, in one way, I'm thinking that you become a writer in order to take this message across. Am I right?
No, I write on various topics. I write on travel, human interest, human stories, and so on, and food also. I write a lot about food, and but yes, certain social issues I feel have to be written about, and textiles is my passion. So
I
that's
also wonder you'll be writing about music, ma'am, because where did you get this interest on music that you choose to combine, looms and music, the raga of the looms and things like that. And even in your narration about the loom when it is operating, you talked about the sound it makes and things like that. So you must be naturally inclined towards music, because there are many music lovers here who would like to hear about authors' interest on music.
No, I feel having lived in Chennai, I should have been more exposed to classical music, which I haven't. And then my interests lie in music, any kind of music I love. But whenever you love something, you see music in that. Like, even if you're going to serve something and you cook something, I always say, if you cook with love, it turns out well. Then the tinkling of the spoon on the plate and the serving of it. Or if you serve it on a vada ila, you take it in your hand and you slurp it. That's music to me. I love eating out of a plantain leaf. The people laugh at me. My maids say they laugh. And we have a plantain tree upstairs in our terrace garden. And every time it gives a leaf, I say, bring it to me. I eat out of that. That is music to me. The rustling of that leaf when they put it on the table. And then you take it in your hand and you put it in your mouth. And then, that kind of thing. That is music. So if there's something you love dearly, you do connect it to music. That is my way of looking at it.
Okay, now you understand the connection you have with the music also. Brilliant to see music everywhere and listen to music anything.
You should see beauty and music everywhere. That's what makes life, I think.
Thank
Asha, I think, has got her hand up for something.
Yes, over to Asha.
Hello, Savita Ma. Lovely to hear you talk so passionately about your book.
Nice to have you here. Thank you for coming.
I always love to listen to your talks, Savita Ma. By the way, I'm Asha from Crafts Council for the book club members. So I see all the books you write, like you said, the food, the weaving, everything. You're so passionate about it, and that's what we actually see. And we are waiting to see this this new thing about music now. We would love to see something about music. I mean, connected to the food and the way you just spoke about it. We would love to see. As women, all of us share the same passions: food, clothes, and music, and stuff like that. So my question was about. You mentioned that the other weavers from other weaving clusters are doing well. I share a similar thing when they come for the national conferences and when they talk about their journeys and their future. They are so optimistic. But when I see the weavers of Tamil Nadu, especially our weavers, they only talk about their problems all the time. Is it because they are not getting enough support from the government or the local bodies that they are not able to overcome the problems that they face?
Asha, they're definitely facing problems. And there are two things. See, they don't want the children to continue in the same vocation. They want them to study. They do not want, and even if it means sweeping a corporate floor or being a server, in Murugan Idli or something like that, they don't mind. They don't mind that, and I don't know. They feel it's undignified to be a weaver. That is the feeling that they have, and so the parents are getting old and they suffer from knee arthritis sitting at the looms for so long. They have eye problems. And so they want to pass on the baton to their children, but they are not interested. So, you know, we have to wean them back into the fold and get them or train absolutely new set of people. So even that I'm appealing for a training scheme. I've talked to the Rotary, I've talked to other NGOs who are willing to help. And I think it's a good idea to train the women, because always weaving was a male preoccupation. But now why not? And the women were only doing ancillary jobs. But now why not get the women trained? You know, then it can be
and they are such a big force. Actually, the women force are idling away, not being able to do something. It's not that they're not willing to do, but just that they need to be tapped. It's such a big force that can be tapped for weaving. So thank you, Savitama, for answering that question. Thank you. It was lovely listening to you.
Yes, Prashant here, Savitama ma'am. How are you doing?
I think Mr. Patti is asking something.
Prashant is raising a question.
Oh, sorry.
No, let him go. Let him go.
Yeah, Prashant, you can continue.
Can you hear? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Savitama ma'am, Prashant here. How are you doing?
I'm fine, but I can't see you.
Really? Okay. My video is on.
Now you'll be able to see, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you are so nice. Nice to see you, old friend.
Yes.
Young friend. Sorry.
So, you know, we have been lucky to see you at your earlier book launch, you know. So that has driven something deep into our minds, me and Kalpana. So we see, like you talked about weavers. So I'm talking about jewelry, because there is so much handmade jewelry which is getting lost. People like we have had absolutely talented goldsmiths, but they have not been able to pass on the skills to the next generation, or many a time the next generation are not picking it up. And my dad always used to say these talented smiths always have one dosham. So they are either drunkards or they don't have that kind of what do you say? They're not able to commit the job full time. So me and Kalpana really want to pick up something on handmade and revive whatever we can. At present, we are still working on it, but we will do it.
Anyway, I can help you because I'm interested in any craft. Maybe I'll write a book on jewelry one day.
Sure, we would definitely. We will do it together. Thank you.
That would be amazing, Savita ma'am. I'm sure it will be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant, for that. And Mr. Krish Patti would like to ask a question. He raised his hand. I hope he wants to ask something to you, ma'am. Go ahead, sir. Sir, are you on mute or?
You have to unmute, Patti. Unmute.
Sir, we are not able to hear you, sir. Hello? Sir, we are not able to hear you. We want to hear you. Can you unmute? Okay, I think he's already unmuted, but his mic is not.
No, I don't think he's unmuted.
Is there anybody who's near him? Who's there?
I think send him a message in chat.
Okay, fine. So I don't know how to stop him. I think he's already raising the question. Yeah.
He is a weaver himself, but he's a weaver.
Oh, okay.
And he's my husband's classmate. But this happens always. I don't know whether he's muted.
I have sent him a personal message to unmute, but I guess he's not even seeing it.
Okay. Okay.
If he has asked a question, we won't know what it is.
Now he is looking for an answer.
Now only we are able to hear, sir. Sir, can you repeat the question?
We didn't hear you at all, Patti.
Oh, you dropped the mic. Then it's audible.
We didn't hear you at all.
Ma'am, it's your job to make the voice of the weavers be, heard by all of us. Can you repeat, sir? Can you repeat your question? Are we audible to you? Okay, fine. I think.
He's been married 65 years, and he is a weaver.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, my question was, since I have been a weaver myself at Kumbakonam, silk weaver, and also there was a very famous Tamil writer who got Sahitya Academy Award by name M.B. Vengatram, and he wrote a novel about silk weavers of Kumbakonam. The name of the novel was Velvet Tea, that is Homa Agni, that is in Tamil. Very closely similar to your novel of silk weavers. I just wanted to ask you whether you have read it, that book, that novel. Very, very interesting. You may get it in translation also in English, perhaps. I just wanted to ask.
No, I haven't read it.
I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you so
very
much for coming and
I'm
being
very
so
keen
patient.
I'm very keen to read your book as early as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's an honor that you have come today, and we heard your voice too. Thank you so much. So we have almost come to the end of the program. It's 4:30. If there is any more questions from anyone, I don't want you to go empty-handed. The last question anyone wants to ask?
Yeah, can I go, TG? Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead, please.
One last question is, I just stopped when it was 4 to give a chance. Now I have a minute, so I thought I'll go. Okay, where does one buy these handloom, these saris? There is Satta who wants to buy it for Mekla and TG for Saraswati. So tell me where we can buy these saris.
Okay, see, there are few things I can recommend. In the old days, we all used to make a beeline to Radha silks, but that has changed. Then I used to go only to Sundari silks. Now that also the second generation has taken over, so you can say. Nalli always has, but then you have to really look and search and think. And the best way to buy it is in one of these craft fairs, which Crafts Council, we run fairs. Then we have a shop called Kamala on Pantheon Road, which is next to Co-optics. They have beautiful saris, but at a price. And it's genuine handloom. You can get it there. But the Dastakar Haat and all these other exhibitions which used to come in, Kalakshetra, that's one of the best places to buy. And then, of course, if you want South Indian saris, I have my own weavers. I'll send the contact numbers. They will send their catalog. There's one man who's making saris with banana fiber, pineapple fiber, and this Kaskas Tatti fiber, aloe vera fiber, and things like that. So he's in Anakapattur. There's another man in Jalakandapuram who produces saris from 750 to 2,500, which are cotton saris. Then I have my silk fellow in Tanjavur. So all of them will send. And the silk man has become so tech savvy now. He started off as, when I mentored him 8 years ago, he was a shy fellow who wouldn't take one step forward without consulting me. And I said, no more hand holding, Vijay. You got to stand on your own feet now. You better sink or swim, that sort of thing. And I was encouraging him to sell online, because if he comes to Chennai and he knows, Kalpana, you want something, he'll bring his whole bundle there. So now he's got his own website. I'm really proud of him. And he has the most beautiful collection of saris. It's silk saris, some are cotton saris, some are silk cotton. So if you want something specific, you'll tell me. I'll direct you to people.
Yeah, please. I think you can put a link or two on the book club, and whoever's interested will definitely take it forward, right? The whole idea is to also reach out.
Okay.
So,
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kalpana. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Because Kalpana, you're a facilitator, your question is out of syllabus. So there's one more opportunity for others to ask. Anybody else who want to ask a question to ma'am as a final question? Otherwise, can we wind up?
Go, Digi.
Yeah, please
Digi?
go ahead. Yeah.
Go
ahead, sir.
These weavers, in Tamil Nadu mattum vandu where and all they are clustered. I mean
See, the
it's only in
clusters that-
Kanchipuram or they are scattered all through?
No, weavers are everywhere, and most of them are Saurashtrians. They are migratory weavers, and there are the Salias and all different kinds of communities. They are all over, not just concentrated. I started working in the south with Kanchipuram weavers because that sari you can see in the background is a Korvai sari, where it's very difficult to weave that sari because it's got a solid border. And then later on, I started to go to other smaller pockets, like Anakaputtur was weaving Madras checks when we started going there. And then they were weaving turbans for people in Africa. Then that market collapsed. Then I asked them to start weaving fabric by the meter. And that was a great hit. You know, they used to put in all the pater and all the designs and weave by the meter. That went on. Yeah, in Tamil Nadu, I can work now only with the weavers in Tamil Nadu. But I also like to help, like, these Khatris, if they want. They don't need help because they're very established. They are doing Bandhani and Ajrak and that sort of thing. But if any weaver needs help, I'm quite willing to help them wherever they are.
Okay.
Sabitama, can you mention something about the sari you're wearing?
It is a revival sari. It was revived by one of the girls from NID. It was in some village in South India where they were weaving the saris, and then after that they stopped. It's got a double border, one in red and one in yellow. And she wore hundreds of saris, and a lot of them were selling in Crafts Council. A lot of them. We sold quite a bit, and we had a program also where I introduced that girl and in Crafts Council.
And where do we get to know about the craft councils, exhibitions? Because you said we can pick up some saris from there. So where do we get those kind of information? Where it is getting held?
No, Crafts Council exhibitions, we usually put it in the paper and it comes out in Hindu. There's a feature, they talk about it. But if you want, that shop is always there. Pantheon Road. Asha, is it open now? The shop? Asha?
Yes, Sabitama, it's open, but
Because
it's on
it was-
appointment. You have to inform them because they don't want too many people at a time. So,
yeah, because they are closed, for some time.
Yeah, they opened once the government allowed them to. So it is open, and you get all the varieties there. And I think they do an online shopping is also available now. After the pandemic, they've started doing the online sale. So.
And also the information about the upcoming exhibitions.
And this person was asking about, he was asking about the exhibitions. We have a Facebook page. Crafts Council has a Facebook page. We have an Insta page also. We keep advertising on that whenever there are new exhibitions coming up.
But now even exhibitions are virtual.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we crossed our time by 6 minutes. So with your permission, ma'am, shall we close the session? Yeah. Kalpana, and can we close today's session? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having come on, ma'am. Ma'am, it's been a very, very, enlightening session because many of us who are in the city and who do not know what's happening outside, especially the plight of weavers and their life, through just simple, pages, the book, you brought their life into our lives, and we are able to go through each and every character, very strong characters, and you portrayed it so well. So much goes into each and every craft. That's what I'm able to pick up from this. And it is our duty not only to, appreciate it, but also to nurture it and support them so that this will continue, like what you said as a parampara, the paramparik kala. So thank you for having come over here and, enlightening us about this. Thank you so much. And Kalpana, thank you so much for facilitating the session and having.
Kalpana, thank you, and thank
That's
you
total.
for all the tech savvy, being tech savvy and helping out